Good Saturday morning, everyone. This is Robert Hubbell from today's edition newsletter. Welcome again to my weekly Substack live stream. Um, we meet 1 week after the start of Trump's illegal war on Iran, and I would say it has been quite a week, but we've survived another week. I think our spirits are good because of the results of the primaries on Tuesday. We saw some really encouraging signs there. And I think that the American public is grappling as best it can with the war in Iran, given what has happened. Um, I'll speak for about 10 minutes, and then really I just want to address questions that people have posted in on the sheet that I linked in the notice of this live stream. I think it's important for us as people who care about democracy and our Constitution to separate the military and the geopolitical aspects of the war on Iran from the injury to our Constitution and to our democracy. Let me just say, for purposes of argument, even if it were the right thing to do to destroy Iran's military capability, to target its civilian leadership, even if that was the right approach, doing so by ignoring the US Constitution is just not something that we can abide. It furthers Trump's slide into autocracy. It normalizes the notion that somehow Congress has no agency, that it's a mere appendage. From a constitutional perspective, that it has surrendered its entire oversight role. And of course, this week, both the House and Senate, the Republicans in both of those institutions, um, refused to pass a resolution invoking the War Powers Act, which would have put a time limit on Trump's ability to conduct the war in Iran. So I, I I was in a conversation with a reader via correspondence this week, and he essentially said, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Maybe Trump is right in what he's doing. And if that's right, let's set that aside. The question is what he is doing consistent with our Constitution? And I think the answer is just absolutely not. And I fear that, as I wrote in today's newsletter, that the chaos will spread, that the death and destruction will spread, and the people's representatives will have never had the opportunity to weigh in on the commitment of American men and women, their lives, hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe even $1 trillion in a war if it goes on for a year. And our elected representatives will have had nothing, nothing to say about that. And that cannot be um, the way that we conduct ourselves. I see someone wants to know what the vote was in the House. I believe that four Democrats in the House passed over and opposed the War Powers Resolution. I don't know their names. They are people who typically vote against these types of resolutions because they are in Democratic seats in red areas and believe wrongly, I believe, that somehow siding with Trump will make their seats safer. I don't think that's right. Um, but I want to address sort of where readers are coming from, because I think that there has been a particular psychic injury to all of this that we need to acknowledge. Um, I alluded to this last week, and now I think we can speak with some, or I can speak with some confidence, that one of the first acts of this war was for a U.S. missile to kill 150 or more Iranian schoolgirls as they were in their classroom on the first day of the school week. And I think the United States government knows that it was a U.S. missile that did that, and they just continue to say, we're investigating. They know what missiles they fired, and they know where those missiles hit. And so the absence of any acknowledgement or empathy or apology for killing civilians, innocent school children, is just horrific. And it is compounded by this amateurish, adolescent attitude of Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, who are releasing these grotesque, vile videos that glorify killing, that mock it, that turn it into a subject of humor. And my God, even if they can't find in themselves the empathy to grieve for the children who were killed, what about having some dignity and respect and sobriety for the American soldiers who have been killed? This is serious business. But Pete Hegseth does not think so. There will be a CBS 60 Minutes interview with Pete Hegseth this Sunday, courtesy of Barry Weiss in her effort to promote the Trump administration in all things. And so we're going to have to listen to Hegseth beat his breast. One of the things he said during the interview is that the only ones that need to be worried right now are Iranians who think they might live. And that's just, it's just inhumane. He doesn't talk about combatants. He doesn't talk about military members. He doesn't talk about terrorists. He talks about Iranians, also known as people, people who have hopes and dreams and families and fears and aspirations just like we do. I suspect that most people in Iran have want nothing to do with this war, but our Secretary of Defense just made an ugly boys playground boys school threat against the people of Iran. I mean, it's just unfathomable that we have sunk to this level. And what's even worse is that Russia is helping Iran, and Pete Hegseth. Let me stop there. Russia is helping Iran to target U.S. military installations. And Pete Hegseth just brushed that off and said, oh, well, they're not really threatening anybody. Really? Providing Iranians with high quality coordinate information about where U.S. assets are located in the Middle East isn't threatening anyone? What does it take to get through Pete Hegseth's, immature adolescent viewpoint that war is like a video game? And the problem is that they are doing these things. They, Trump, they, Hegseth, they, Miller, are doing and saying these things. And whether we like it or not, they are the government of the United States of America at this point. And it is shameful. It is disgraceful. It is embarrassing that these people have made their way into office and that they represent us in some way. And that's hard for people to tolerate. Here is, I'm not going to use any names, but I want to read a comment that someone posted on the Google sheet today. Do you have any advice on staying positive amidst the deluge of terrible news? I realize this is a strategy on their part to overwhelm us so that we give up. I'm determined not to let them win, but I have had to bury my head in the sand in the past 24 hours just for survival. Maybe I'm just asking for another of your uplifting pep talks. Thank you in advance. And I'm going to read what the reader came back and wrote something, but I want to say that if you feel that way, that proves that you are human. This is awful. We shouldn't be in this situation. And feeling that way is the appropriate emotional response. Um, and also the ask is the right response to say, can I be with others? Can I sit with others and take strength and comfort from them. And a couple of minutes later, the reader added this. Here's a follow-up from my earlier request for a pep talk. I posted that before I had read through your entire newsletter this morning. That did the trick. The combination of Obama's words and your positive guidance have left me grateful and determined again. I am back up and ready to go. I will be out protesting today. You know, we all have those moments. And what we do need is inspiration. If you haven't clicked on the link that I put in the newsletter to Obama delivering the remarks that I posted in the newsletter, I urge you to do so. As I said, it was a moment of grace, but a moment that showed who we are as a people and who we will become once again in two election cycles. Um, if you are feeling the way this reader did, do exactly what the reader did. Go out today, go out tomorrow, stand with people who refuse to give up on democracy, who refuse to allow Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller to be the face of America. Um, this is frustrating. I get that. Other readers posted saying, why can't we impeach Trump now? We just don't have the votes in the House. We would need 4 or 5 or 6 Republicans to support articles of impeachment in the House. They would never they would never lead to a conviction in the Senate. And that's a frustrating answer, but that is where we are now. But what we are doing by protesting, by not giving up, is exactly what we need to do to end this madness. We are oh so close to being able to take over the House. Maybe we'll do so before the midterms. Um, but even if we don't, if we can just get 4 or 5 or 6 Republicans to join us, we can at least pass articles of impeachment. We can pass a war powers resolution in the House. So don't give up. Um, we we're on the right path. We just need to keep doing it. Um, there are other fears that people have expressed about this war, and I don't think I'm going to articulate them because I don't want to spread panic. But you can imagine what they are. I mean, we're Iran is aspires to be a nuclear power. It has nuclear material that doesn't have to be in a bomb to, do damage. And people are worried about where all of this is going. And obviously, I do not know because there are two actors here who will determine the outcome of this. And frankly, I think the United States is being the most irrational actor at this point. And I say that because this morning Iran made a very ambiguous statement suggesting that it would cease attacking other countries in the Middle East that are not actively supporting U.S. warfighting operations. And it has reduced the number of drones that it has been sending over the last 24 hours dramatically by like 90%. Um, some commentators have said that what Iran is saying essentially is that it will abide by the law of war, that it will only view as combatants those countries that are actively involved in attacking it. And Trump's response on Truth Social this morning was, "Oh, hooray! Iran effectively surrendered. Now I'm going to go bomb the you know what out of them a lot more." It it made no sense whatsoever. If this was an olive branch, if this was Iran looking for an off-ramp, Trump's response was more bombs. It just doesn't make any sense. So all I can say is if you can this morning or tomorrow or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, go out and make your voice heard. Show up on March 28th for the next No Kings rally. We need 30 million people out on March 28th, or 40 million, or 50 million people. The American people do not want this war. And the longer that it goes on, the more likely there will be some catastrophe that will result in the loss of American lives, more American lives. And the responsible voices in the room, which at this point are largely us, need to raise our voices as much as possible, as clearly as possible, to say, not in our name. We are not going to allow you to conduct this illegal war in our name without the constitutional processes unfolding as they should, because we're not only defending America, we have to defend the Constitution as well. Um, The other thing I will just say, I appreciate the reader's kind words about the Substack this morning. I'm glad that the reader found it comforting. I think most of that came from Obama's comments, and Biden gave a great speech, Bill Clinton gave a great speech, Kamala Harris gave a great speech. I just didn't have time to digest them all. I may come back to them, but I urge you to spend some time with the links that I put in the newsletter. It will raise you up. It will fortify you for the fights to come. Um, okay, so with that, let me just address some of the questions that I got today, because there are some other very good questions. One is, can the U.S. military refuse to bomb or attack or otherwise follow the orders to engage in the war against Iran? That's a very complicated legal question, and I think this is a that there is likely a legal memo floating around somewhere among the commanders that says that this war has legal authority. And sadly, the Republicans in Congress have given support for that position by refusing to invoke the War Powers Act. So if you are an enlisted man or a middle rank officer and someone gives you an order, you know, going through the legal analysis of whether this um, the fate of those provisional ballots has to be decided by March 9th. Um, Monday, I believe. And the Texas Supreme Court will decide what to do. Um, okay, so people are saying that there is an interruption in the video feed. We're having a wind event in Southern California. We have Spectrum, AT&T, and every time it it's windy or it rains, our internet um, goes wonky. So I apologize for that. Can I explain what I was saying when I went dark? I was talking about what the status of the ballots in Dallas County, Texas is, and the short answer is that they have to be decided. Their fate has to be decided by March 9th, and that will, I believe, be decided by the Texas Supreme Court. I do want to address the fact that because there are only 2,100 votes that were cast provisionally, and I don't mean to minimize that, they are not enough to change or decide the fate of the primary between James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett. And that is why Jasmine Crockett acted so responsibly and quickly in issuing a statement of concession and calling for unity, which I praised. She had a couple of bases of feeling like she was treated unfairly in the process. I don't know that it helps to revisit all of those, but instead of looking back, she recognized that Tallarico had scored a victory with very significant and quite encouraging support from the Latino community in Texas. And given the fact that the number of provisional ballots was not enough to change the outcome of the election, she decided to concede. And she just has my greatest admiration and respect for doing that. For those of you who've missed what I've said, I will post the video, and if you're interested, you could go back. I apologize, as I noted, there's a wind event here in Los Angeles, and whenever that happens, the Spectrum internet service goes out. There is concern about what Colorado's Governor Jared Polis is going to do with respect to Tina Peters, and whether he will grant her clemency. Um, just to reset, Tina Peters was an election denier. She was an election official in Colorado who gave access to her countywide voting system, the data, and more importantly, to the systems themselves, to election deniers who went around and were able to replicate and share the election systems, to share the data. One of them posted some of the data from that breach at a election deniers conference. And so she was a public official who had fiduciary duties to protect that information, and instead she engaged in subterfuge and lies and concealment and denials to allow someone to break into the election system. And she was convicted by a jury of her peers, and she was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Um, Trump has been pressuring Governor Polis to grant clemency to Tina Peters, and they are pointing to a Democrat who attempted to persuade an elected official through bribery or some other crime to take some official act. And that Democrat received like a two years of probation instead of 9 years in prison. And I would say there is no comparison between those two crimes. One of them violated the integrity of every vote that was cast, violated the integrity of the election systems. She lied about it. She weaponized it. She gave it to election deniers who spread it far and wide. And, I hope that those of you who are constituents of Jared Polis in Colorado will speak out and make your voices heard. I've read his statement that he's released, and it sure sounds like he's getting ready to grant her clemency. And I cannot understand for the life of me why he would do that, given the difference in the crimes. Um, a number of people have asked me to comment on a video of a speech by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse on the Senate floor that talked about the Russian connections to um, Epstein. I have not been able to watch that entire speech. It's, I think, 30 minutes long, and it's relatively complicated. I do intend to comment on it, but I want to feel more confident about what he has said. Actually, maybe it's an hour long. He covers a vast amount of material and suggests that Epstein had ties to the CIA, which I think is not a new allegation, that he may have been engaged in blackmail, that he may have had connections to Russian mobsters, that he may have been managing some of Putin's money. I have no idea whether any of those allegations have a basis in fact sufficient to uh, to spread them, far and wide. I intend to look at it. If anybody has any resources that they want to send to me, I would be happy to take a look at that because it apparently has impressed and many people. And look, Sheldon Whitehouse is a very serious guy. He's a responsible a member of the Senate, and he chooses his words carefully, and he obviously put a lot of thought into what he did. So it's possible that the Epstein scandal is much worse than we thought, in that it is not only a series of crimes against young girls and young women, but it is also, in effect, a political crime against America by cooperating with Russia in doing nefarious things. And so let me just stop there and say I will come back to this. The final question that I will talk about is someone wants to know about I posted a link today from Lawyers Defending American Democracy, and they are asking for lawyers. At the moment, only lawyers can sign a petition opposing a proposed regulation published by Pam Bondi in the Code of Federal Regulations that would in effect, allow the Department of Justice to intervene in state bar disciplinary proceedings. Um, so, as I mentioned Thursday, Lindsay Halligan is the subject of a state bar proceeding. It's possible that Pam Bondi may also be the subject of a proceeding. I know from some legal advocacy groups that they have reached out and attempted to lodge a complaint against Pam Bondi in Florida, I believe, and that complaint was rejected without explanation. So here, Bondi may be attempting to use a federal regulation to insulate herself and Halligan and every other member of the Department of Justice who is currently active in the Department of Justice against regulatory disciplinary action by states. So, for those of you who are lawyers, I urge you to read and to sign that. I have sent a note this morning to Lawyers Defending American Democracy saying that readers who are not lawyers who want to sign are expressing great interest. I'll let you know if there's any change in that at the moment. But let me talk about the substance of this. I just believe, as a matter of federalism, that the federal government cannot intervene or stay state court proceedings where the subject of the proceeding is a license that is granted by the state. I mean, the federal government has no authority over whether or not that state license remains valid. And I cannot imagine that any court would implement or give force and effect to a regulation. Little, I mean, it's just something that Pam Bondi's proposing in the Code of Federal Regulations. She doesn't have statutory authority to do that. She doesn't have judicial authority to do that. She's just trying to muck up the waters. I feel fairly confident that a legal attack on that regulation would be successful, but we should raise our voices. Um, if the Department of Justice wants to say we'll hire people and we don't care whether they're licensed to practice law, we don't care whether their licenses have been revoked, we don't care whether they've been disciplined, let them. And when we take back over control of the Department of Justice, we will get rid of everyone who is unqualified, who refuses to comply with the code of professional responsibility that applies to every lawyer who is licensed. There's an ABA model code, even if the state law doesn't have a specific code that covers an instance. So this is just another instance of Pam Bondi's attack on the rule of law, which is where we started. In a way, the war on Iran is an attack on the rule of law. It is Trump testing us once again to say, "Let me just see how far I can go." I mean, so far, most people, aren't stopping me, so I'll just keep going until somebody does stop me, and I'm talking about stop in the political sense. So it is important that we not lose sight of the democratic rule of law implications to this war. I understand that readers are passionate about what Iran has done as a state sponsor of terrorism and its destabilizing role and its pursuit of nuclear weapons. But we have a stake in this fight as well, and that is whether our Constitution means what it says, whether our Congress has any vitality and any remaining role in governing American democracy as our representatives. I believe it does. And I believe that we cannot give up that fight because of geopolitical and military issues that may have merit or may not, separately. But we have to have the discussion. We have to let democracy work. So I hope you will all get out sometime in the next week, raise your voices, that you will make plans to join the No Kings protest on March 28th, so that it just gets to a point where there are so many of us out there on the streets, they cannot ignore us, so that they are more afraid of us from a political standpoint than they are afraid of Donald Trump and his stubborn, 30% of MAGA base that are never going to turn on him. So that's where we are this morning. I understand it's a tough time, but if you're like the reader who sent me that note, go find someone who's involved in the fight, sit with them, be in their presence, go stand out by a roadside and accept those people honking and the people who are flipping you off, because at least you're engaging them. You are making them think about what is happening in America. So God bless you all. Have a good weekend, and I will talk with you tomorrow.